All right, everybody, welcome back to Gridiron Gang, a Detroit News Lions podcast. Today is Thursday, April 2nd, 2026, and we got a big-time show for you guys today. Coming out of owners' meetings, some drama in Lions land involving Taylor Decker and the Detroit Lions, some drama involving Frank Ragnow and the Detroit Lions, that plus a whole lot more from Dan Campbell and Rod Wood. We're going to get to all that in just a second, but before we do, I am Nolan Bianchi. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Richard Silva. Richard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I think the better question is, how are you doing? How has Arizona been at owners' meetings been?
It's been good. It's been hot, which is not a complaint because fortunate to enjoy the sunshine, but at the same time, I don't deal well with the heat, and so
And especially
uh,
the dry heat.
well, yeah, I mean, people will tell you, oh, it's dry heat, it's not that bad. No, it's still pretty bad. It's still pretty bad. It
It's
still
both.
makes me really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just different. It's bad in its own unique ways.
Yeah, yeah. I'll take it over the humidity, but
Sure.
other than that, things are going well out here. Things are over already. I always forget how short of an event this is, and especially this year because we did not talk to Brad Holmes. We only talked to Rod Wood and Dan Campbell. So week went by pretty fast, but lots of news to catch up on. Obviously, like I said at the top of the show, we'll start with Taylor Decker because this is a story that dropped before owners' meetings and then carried into the week. Justin Rogers of Detroit Football Network, our old colleague over here at the Detroit News, dropped a story. He flew out to Arizona early because that's where Taylor Decker lives in the offseason and spoke to him to get his perspective on what went down between him and the team, because I think there were a lot of unanswered questions coming out of the situation of, it seemed like the Lions wanted him back up until the time that he announced that he was coming back. And then it was like, did they ever want him back at all? And we kind of got some new details that I don't think make the Lions look very good, or at least Brad Holmes in this case. And that's that basically, as the story goes, as Taylor Decker tells it or told it to Justin, he took the time away to contemplate his future. He in his exit meetings, he let them know he was thinking about retiring. He was thinking about all these things. They told him to take his time, whatever. And then he finally decides that he's going to come back, and he texts Brad Holmes
Brad Campbell.
and Dan Campbell separately.
That'd be a pretty smart football mind, Brad Campbell.
Yeah. So he texts both those guys separately. Dan says, great, let me talk to Brad and we'll get back to you. And then Brad does not allegedly answer him at all. And so that, I think, left a bad taste in his mouth. And then without hearing from Brad first, he finds out through his agent, and again, this is all according to him, that they want him to take a pay cut, which is not something that was previously discussed in the exit interview process, it sounds like. And so I think he was a little bit hurt by that. And he hadn't heard from Dan Campbell after he was delivered that new information. And I think he was a little hurt by that. Dan Campbell talking about it at owners meetings, basically just saying, like, look, it's the business. Like, I do feel bad that he feels that way, but I'm certainly not going to call him now that article came out, because I want him to know that it's genuine when I do reach out. But yeah, I mean, Dan Campbell kind of just, he took it's a business approach, which I see it from both sides. And I don't think that Dan Campbell looks as bad in this as Brad Holmes, because he at least acknowledged the fact that Taylor wanted to come back. And obviously agents exist for a reason. Like, their contract things can get messy, but I think this was a case where you just got to speak directly to the player and let him know what you're thinking, how you're hoping to handle it, what you want. Let him know what your feelings are, because this is a guy who was with this organization for 10 years, and he was at the forefront of this turnaround, and he was an emotional leader for the team. He's an emotional guy. It does not surprise me that he came out and was willing to speak on this and spoke on, I guess, just the basic idea that his feelings were hurt. And so I think I walked away being like, man, Brad Holmes probably should have called him back. At least, I don't think there was like an egregious misstep here. Just call the guy,
I am actually, so I don't know who looks worse or who looks better between the Lions or Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, but I can say that I'm more shocked at the Dan Campbell side of it than anything else, because like you said, like, it is a business, and I do understand, especially after we saw the tackle market that was maybe a little bit lesser, like a little depreciated than we thought it was going to be. I think, yeah, moving off of Decker at the $21 million cap hit that he's going to have this upcoming year, like, makes sense, like totally sound business. And if Brad Holmes has to be, if they have to be good cop, bad cop, and Brad Holmes has to be bad cop, then so be it. Like that's business. That's the NFL. Like Brad Holmes has to do business. But Dan Campbell is, his why, part of, not all the reason why, but part of why he's been so successful is guys will do anything for him. They'll run through a brick wall. They'll do that one extra rep. They'll catch that one extra pass. They'll do everything for Dan Campbell because he cares about them, because he was one of them for a decade, because he knows what it's like for all of that. So in the whole process, what surprised me the most was that Dan had not reached out to Taylor after everything broke down. Forget the miscommunications of maybe they said to his agent he was going to take a pay cut. The agent didn't say it. Maybe they didn't say it to the agent, and they just sprung it on Taylor. There's two sides to every story, whatever. And that doesn't mean either side could be lying. It could be difference of interpretations of how a conversation went. One side could think this was conveyed. The other side could not think it was conveyed. Forget all of that. Just after it all broke down, was stunned and still am stunned that Dan didn't call Taylor just to say, not even say sorry, like, but just sorry it went how it went. And like, I really do wish you well. Like, you're welcome back here as, like, around the Lions. Like, you're still a Lion. Like, you the past 10 years that you spent here mean something. Because I saw that, of course there was differing opinions amongst Lions fans, some in support of Taylor, some not. And I saw some people saying, like, oh, like, he asked for his release, he got released. Like, what is the team supposed to call and check in on him and see how he's doing? And I don't think Taylor is expecting that. Like, I don't think Taylor is expecting regular communication with Dan Campbell weekly anymore. Like, I think he just a phone call after 10 years given to the franchise, 5 of those given to the Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes regime. And another argument as well is people saying, like, he was compensated handsomely. Like, the Lions held up their end of the bargain by paying him. Agreed. And I think the money is for being ready on Sundays and playing well on Sundays. And much more often than not, Taylor did that. Like, he did all the extra steps to be ready to play. He had, like, what was it, like, once in the past 5 years he missed significant amount of time in 21 where Panay had to go play left tackle for half the season. So more often than not, he was there on the field playing well. Like, as much as the Lions paid him, I think he held up his end of the bargain of that as well. And all the extra stuff that he did, the half dozen major surgeries that he had to go through. I know Justin highlighted some more things that he had to do. I believe Justin mentioned, like, something with, like, I don't know. I don't want to speak and put words in Justin's mouth, but just crazy surgeries and off-season rehabs. He talked about at the end of the year, like, even like picking his kid up or playing or throwing a football, like a toy football, to his kid was like a chore. I think all that extra stuff, in my opinion, should buy a guy respect. That's how I feel. And it does break my, sorry, I'm rambling. It does break my heart a little bit that, because knowing how emotional Taylor is, like you said, not that it's a bad thing. He's not, like, sitting there crying every day, but I know he cares about his legacy, especially here in Detroit. Like, he wanted to win a Super Bowl so bad. He wanted to be, like, the guy that was here through all the bad times and made it through and all that. Like, he cares about his legacy. He sees what people say about him. And it does break my heart a little bit that at least a portion of the fan base is like, you know what, man, you asked for your release. You weren't playing that well towards the end anyway. Your shoulder kept getting hurt. Screw you. And that is a little upsetting to me.
Well, and I think the most shocking part of it to me of this story, and it didn't lead the story because it's not as salacious as, stories involving Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, but the fact that Hank Fraley apparently did not reach out to him at all, his position coach. And I think that was probably what bothered him the most, if I were to guess, is the fact that, your position coaches are basically like I feel like a lot of them become, like, if you're with one for an extended amount of time, like, they kind of become father figures, which is like a weird thing to say about guys who are, like, 21 to 35 or whatever. But, like, you really, really develop a strong bond with those guys. And those are kind of the people that you go to when you're having problems, whether it be with, whatever.
They can be a liaison
with the game.
Like
they're a liaison. Yep. And they were together for 8 years. Like, Hank Fraley did not just show up here and work with Taylor Decker for 2 years. Like, no, they, in a lot of ways, like were hand in hand with the success of building this offensive line into one of the league's best. And I think he probably could have gotten over the Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes stuff. Addie heard from Hank Fraley. I don't know that, that's pure speculation on my end there, but I think that was probably something that really, really, really drove the point home. That I think would naturally, cause some, upsetment. That's not a word. Discontent.
Sure.
Discontent.
There you
And sadness. Because I mean, like, think about like at the end of the day, the NFL is a business, yada, yada, yada. We hear that all the time. Totally. I still, in my business, like, if somebody gets let go, somebody like the boss will call, like, hey, or somebody quits, somebody, whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's sometimes I feel like it's an excuse to be like, nah, I didn't feel like it. Like, in a lot of ways and part of it is probably because like these guys are just so busy, right? Like at the end of the season, you got the draft coming up, you got free agency coming up. I'm sure there was like a part of things where it was like, maybe he just like Dan Campbell had his head down and was buried in free agency, like trying to catch up on watching film. Who do we like at center? Who can we get here?
Especially after the season that they had last year, and they're super motivated this offseason.
Yes, absolutely. And I can easily see like time getting lost. There are plenty of times to like, when you have to do something, you have to call somebody and kind of deliver bad news, and you're just like, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. And then it's just like you're super busy, and then all of a sudden it just kind of like gets away from you a little bit. And again, this is all speculation on my end here when I'm talking about that specifically, but I can see a world where, I don't even remember where I was going with this point, but I can see a world where it's not malicious. And
absolutely.
And like I said, I think the business thing is like it's thrown out there as like an excuse to be cold-hearted, but I think a lot of time, or in this particular case, like if you want to reference it, it's a business. I think that's an oversimplification, I guess.
I agree. Yeah, like listen, I don't think it was like malicious at all on really anybody's part. Like I don't know that to be certain, but I just can't see like like Dan Campbell being like, screw this guy talking about Taylor Decker. Like that's like no, that didn't happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think Dan Campbell like hates Taylor Decker or anything like that. I don't think Taylor Decker hates Dan Campbell. I just think, like you said, it was a little bit of a miscalculation somewhere along the line, miscommunication. And I'm sure Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes were very busy for all the reasons that you said: draft, free agency, owners meetings, all this stuff. But I do think it was an oversight for at least not one member of the organization, namely Dan Campbell, to reach out so far. And I suspect he will. And I suspect that, because Dan is one of the most probably emotionally intelligent people in football from the past 5 years that we've seen. I imagine he's gonna, it will be, what's the word? Smoothed over. Like it will. I do think it will be fixed. I don't think Taylor Decker's going to be on the outs and hate the Lions or anything like that. But until that call happens, it is, I guess, a little icy.
So as one controversy involving a former Lions offensive lineman starts winding down, another one picked back up midweek over here at owners meetings.
Yeah, just a little bit, right, with Frank Ragnow. So Dave Burkett, before Rod Wood met with the media reporters at large at the owners meetings, Dave Burkett of the Free Press did an interview with Rod in Arizona ahead of his full meeting with the media, and it was, they went over a plethora of topics, but the main one that everyone has latched onto that Dave wrote a separate about was that the Lions have recouped a portion of the signing bonus attached to Frank Ragnow's contract. Frank Ragnow, of course, retired. He signed his extension, a 4-year extension in 2023. He played 2 of those years and did not play in 24 or 25. Or excuse me, 25 or 26 in the future. So his original contract was a $6 million signing bonus on it. The prorations, I think I've seen 2 different ways of people saying it, because the signing bonus is a lump sum paid to a player at the beginning of the deal. He gets $6 million right there. And then for the salary cap purposes, it's prorated over the length of the contract. Frank still had 2 years left on his rookie deal, when he signed this. So I've seen people say that the $6 million was prorated over a 6-year stretch. I've seen people say it was prorated over a 4-year stretch. Whatever, it was between $1 and $2 million of prorations each year. We don't know how much the Lions took back from Ragnow. To be clear, they are like, per the CBA, like they are entitled to the money. Like they're not breaking any rules or laws or anything like that by taking the money back from Frank. They're entitled to do it, and they've been consistent in doing it, as we saw with Barry Sanders in '99, Calvin Johnson almost 2 decades after that. Both of those instances did have, though, negative blowback, both from the players themselves. Both of them, namely Calvin Johnson, were on the outs for years before they reconciled with the Lions, and from, I think, at least a portion of the fan base was unhappy of how the organization was treating the players on the way out.
And like it, I'm trying to think of the way to dive into this here. I kind of understand the idea of like the precedent has been set. Like if we're going to ask this of Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders, like how can we not ask it from Frank Ragnow? But at the same time, $1.2 million. I don't know what the money was on their contracts when they had to pay them back. $1.2 million does not feel like enough money to like counteract the negative PR that they're getting here, because it just makes them look dumb. And like I think especially too, because like this guy tried to come out of retirement for you. And did they ask him to do that before he came out of retirement?
I don't think Dave.
Yeah, we don't.
I don't think that's in Dave's story.
Yeah. And so I do think it's just a little bit weird that the money was so kind of insignificant. Like whether you're just trying to recapture cash, like on behalf of the Ford family, or you're trying to get it like
it does
salary cap.
It does create salary cap space, but it's very minimal.
But like for what? It's like 0.5%, 2.25% of the salary cap. Like it's something like extremely insignificant.
Less than 1% of the salary cap. And you can say, for example, like, well, what if that's the difference between signing Chuck Clark, the safety that they just got, who we're going to talk about later in the show, and not signing Chuck Clark? But the Lions typically carry like an extra, and all teams do this, like an extra $20 million into the season, just in case like 800 guys get hurt and they have to sign a bunch of guys to minimum deals as backup, or as fill-ins. So, and then whatever is unused, because usually there always is some unused at the end, is just rolled over into the next. So it's not like the Lions were at $0 million. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this properly. So if the Lions plan to carry $20 million into the season already, they could have survived carrying $19 million into the season. You know what I mean? Like it's not. If you really needed $1.2 million at some point during the season, you just restructure something. Like there are plenty of things that you can do that would be like relatively easy to complete. And yeah. So the way I see it is, I understand what you're saying, and I understand what like Rod Wood said with like the precedent, and like that does in some ways make sense to me. Like if you ask Barry Sanders to pay it back, everybody else has got to pay it back. If you ask Barry, and especially because that protects you against, I don't know, a guy that has, let's say a guy does get hurt and he's like, you know what, the injury's so bad, I'm just done, and he uses it as an excuse to retire early from football, and he's not really hurt. You know what I mean? And he's just and he just fell out of love with the game. So I do understand, like, you have a precedent, and if you are really hurt, go to a doctor and get medically like barred from playing football or whatever. Like the Lions, they're protecting themselves. But at the end of the day, I think we all know Frank Ragnow wasn't lying about any of the injuries that he saw. Frank Ragnow retired because his body betrayed him. Because every year he got hurt. In 24, he partially tore the pec, missed one game because of it, by the way. He broke his throat, broke a bone in his throat in 2020. He had the inoperable / unfixable toe injury. He played in the playoff game after the meniscus cleanup surgery that he had to have. Like the guy just, his
brother Jack just like casually dropped it. Like we had no idea that he had meniscus surgery mid-season, and then just like went right back to playing until his brother Jack tweeted like he like quote tweeted a highlight of him being like, "This man had meniscus surgery like 2 weeks ago," or something like that. We're all like, "What?"
So I guess the reason why I'm surprised by it is because if the Lions are going to ask their players to go the extra mile and be gritty, like Frank Ragnow absolutely was, like I said, in 24 alone, partially tears his pec, and he missed one game. He missed the Seahawks game, and that injury happened early. That Seahawks game was week 4 that he missed, and then they had the bye, and then he was back for Dallas that year. That when they smoked Dallas, so he played from week 6 on with a partially torn pec. Like, not every guy has to do that. He did the meniscus thing that you talked about. So Frank did answer the call and go above and beyond what some will argue should have done for a reason like this, where Frank did probably cost himself a longer career in the NFL by wanting to play as much as he did. So if the Lions are going to ask their players to go above and beyond, it does feel a little odd that on the way out they don't go above and beyond and paying it back. And especially because, if we're being honest, what Frank Ragnow could have done was over the offseason that he retired, eaten fast food every day, not cared about his body, not worked out, showed up to training camp totally out of shape, and sucked in training camp and forced the Lions to cut him. He could have done that. And then they would not have been able to recoup the money from him in that case. So I don't know. I think Frank did his career and his exit the right way, in my opinion. He was late telling them until after the draft and free agency. He retired in June. In retrospect, should he have told them in March? Yes. Did he know in March? Probably not, because he would have told them in March. The Lions learned from it. The Taylor Decker situation is, even though it got convoluted, was a learning moment where they told Taylor, you need to let us know before the league year starts whether you're retiring or not. That was the one place Frank Ragnow messed up. But every other piece of this, I think Ragnow did the right way.
I completely agree with you. And like, it's funny because we talked to Graham Glasgow at the end of the season, and like, I think we all know that he was one of the players considering retirement. But probably at the instruction of his agent, at no point did he even entertain the possibility that was going to take place. Like, he made the Lions release him. And, we asked him, we were like, so, like, obviously we talked to Taylor and Skip yesterday, and they're both considering retirement. Like, what's next for you? And he's like, what do you mean? We were like, are you going to play next year? He goes, I'm still in a contract. So, and just like, he played it perfectly, and he got released, and he's not going to have to pay back anything. And I agree with like pretty much everything you said. And I also don't want it to be misconstrued that like me understanding the logic of like, hey, there is precedent, like we kind of have to. I don't want that to be misunderstood that I am in support of what they did, because again, so this is from Jason from Over the Cap. His last name, Jason Fitzgerald. Over the Cap, popular salary cap website, something that Rich and I and pretty much everybody who works in NFL media cites all the time. He works for them. Kind of is a good resource for just like explaining little contract minutia or what have you. So he wrote a post kind of talking about all this yesterday. And this is the one paragraph that stood out to me. To chase after a signing bonus when there is only 1 year left that you can chase after the bonus, and after 67% of a long-term contract has been honored, is petty on the part of the team. This was not a blindside situation. He had been contemplating retirement, and it was very clear the team knew this since he announced his retirement on June 2nd, which was the day the Lions could place him on the retired list and split his dead money across 2 years. He didn't belittle the team, demand more money, or anything else. In fact, he tried to come out of retirement during the year, and it didn't work out. I don't think any other team in the NFL would have done this, to be honest, even though it is their right. And so I think that's the part that drives people crazy, is the fact that this is not common practice in the NFL, or at least in cases like this. Like, when you consider the full circumstances, I'm curious to know how accurate that is. I'm inclined to believe him because, like I said, he's Jason from Over the Cap. Like nobody knows more about like what's happening around the league and salary caps and like maneuvers that teams are making, at least in terms of like media and public facing people, than this guy. But I think that's the thing that's really bothering people. And the thing that sticks out to me is that, why is this the only organization who would do something like that? And I think it invokes a lot of those same old Lions. Like, I've seen a lot of that over the last couple of days. And I also think I don't know if it's the end of the world. Like, I think every organization has its things that it's like particularly like notorious for. Like, oh, the Ravens are a great organization, but guess what? Everybody knows that they've done this with the failed physicals before. Like when the Max Crosby thing happened, it was like, yep, that's a Ravens thing, failing a physical because they don't want to pay somebody. Like every team in the NFL like is known for these little kind of like negative quirks and stuff like that. And this one just feels so easily avoidable in terms of the negative PR that they get.
Right. And to be clear, we don't like every situation we don't find out. So like for instance, like the Bears and Drew Dahlman, like we may or may not find out if they try if they recoup the money from him or not. But there are examples of teams that don't. The most famous one is Andrew Luck with the Colts, where he retired a week before the season started and they let him keep it because whatever, how much he meant to the organization. He was retiring because his body, again, it wasn't that he didn't love football anymore. It was that he was hurt. His body was banged up. He was in pain all the time. Yada, 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 all that. It is a little concerning to me. And like you said, like every team's got their stuff. Like no team is perfect. It is a little bit concerning to me that, and like, I don't know. I don't want to say this is like an indictment on the culture or like the culture's dead because it's not. Like, you know what I mean? Like they win 12 games next year and all of a sudden everyone's rowing in the same direction again. And it's like, oh yeah, baby, culture's back. Like we're like Isaiah Pacheco is one of us. Like, you know what I mean? So it could quickly change for the better or the worse. But it is notable, I guess, to me that Jason Kelce came out and a notable voice in and around the NFL, and not just like NFL media. Like he's one of the best centers of all time. Like has pull. Like you know what I mean. Like his opinion matters. Alex Anzalone, who was a teammate last year to all of the guys currently on the roster. Quandre Diggs came out and he was Ragnow's teammate. That there's just some guys that are viewing this and publicly viewing this negatively. I would imagine behind the scenes, there's also players talking and they're like, wow, I can't believe they did this to Frank. And that's not good. You know what I mean? That perception is not good.
I will say though, we'll see if it really matters. You know, like at the same time, like money talks. Like you get that offer and it's $0.4 million in the other team. All right, I don't know. I don't really care what happened to Frank.
Well, absolutely.
It's John Smith, you know.
Yeah, well, it's like the Ravens thing where people were like, "Oh, I could see like the agents, Max Crosby's agents never negotiating with the Ravens again." And it's like, wait until the Ravens are prepared to offer $40 million for their next client. I'm sure they're going to negotiate with the Ravens. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's totally damaging, but I do think it's not the greatest look for the team.
All right, let's take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsor.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back, generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service. So you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford. Driven by family, built on tradition.
All right, segment 2 here at the Gridiron Gang podcast. Like us on YouTube, go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars, leave a comment. Tell us what we could do to get better. Tell us, whatever's on your mind as it relates to this podcast. We really enjoy you hanging out with us. We're going to get to some more highlights from the owners' meetings in the second half of the show. We'll start with no joint practices this year because that was a big news to come out of Campbell's press conference on Monday, and basically saying that over the last 2 years, they just really haven't gotten enough out of them. He thought they were really productive in the Lions' first 2 seasons when he first got here. I don't think they had joint practices in 2021. They were coming off the COVID season. He was new. But then in 2020,
that was when he said like, oops, I forgot. Remember?
Yeah. And then, so they had joint practices against the Colts and maybe one other in 2022. And then they've done, I think, 2 in pretty much every year over the last couple of years. But I think the turning point for them began during the 2024 training camp when they went out to play the New York Giants and like on the third rep, like maybe even the first rep of the day, all hell breaks loose. Drew Phillips and Amon-Ra St. Brown just start going at it. And it kind of just sets the tone for like a day full of fights. Like it was nuts. And
Neighbors and Kirby was the big one. Right.
Yeah, well, that was on day 2.
Okay,
so then like tension boils over, and next day we talked to Dable, we talked to Campbell, and they're like, all we want is no fighting today. If you fight, you're done. Like you're ejected. And that's something that Campbell's been pretty consistent about, like, or at least he was like during the when we got to see what he was saying to the team during 2022 Hard Knocks. He's like, we are evaluating you today. If you get ejected or if you fight, you're getting thrown out, and we are done evaluating you as a player for the day. And so I think this is something that he always like kind of speaks against, but at the same time, you do want to see competitiveness. You do want to see kind of all these things that can tend to lead to altercations. And so the next day, everything goes relatively smoothly. And then right towards the end of practice, Kirby Joseph and Malik Neighbors get in a fight. And then this next year, or I guess this past year, they bring the Dolphins in. The Dolphins were not good. And it was just like, the
first day was bad. It was really bad.
It's like useful for like stacking up like, oh, okay, where are the Lions at this point in the offseason? But I got to be honest, none of it really matters. Like there are plenty of times where I saw Daniel Jones look amazing in joint practices against the Lions, and then like it meant nothing. And so like I think as far as like a measuring stick, they're kind of worthless. And so if you're going out there with the sole purpose of seeing this new team is going to make us better and allow us to like compete better and all this other stuff, and then you go out there and you're like, wow, this team sucks. Like this team is way worse than anything that we could possibly put on the field today using our own players. That's counterproductive. And I totally understand that. And not only that, but when you have the joint practices, it typically costs you a day of practice on the front end of things. So like if they'll have a Thursday preseason game, they'll do joint practices on Monday and Tuesday, but you're probably not having them on Sunday, or you're probably not having a practice on Sunday, and then you're not having a practice the day before the preseason game. So you're kind of losing out on one at the front end of things. And I think that Dan just kind of looked at what was happening over these last 2 joint practice sessions, because I think the one with Houston was good, but they only had him for a day. And so it's like, what is that worth? I don't know. At least in terms of like, is it worth, the logistics of it all? Because it is kind of a pain in the butt. So, yeah, interesting decision, but like, honestly, makes a whole lot of sense. Disappointing for us. I like joint practice. Like it's a nice way to break up the monotony.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's actually pretty worthless as like a measuring stick. And yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit surprised at the decision. And I for all the reasons that you said made sense, and like maybe the joint practices made more sense when the Lions were less of an established team and they know who they are. Like, you know what I mean? But in my brain, like the value of joint practices, and I'm not a football coach, but from what I've heard coaches say, is that, it allows your starters to play against somebody else in a controlled environment where they're less likely to get hurt, versus in the preseason. And Dan said, like, maybe we will play some of our guys in the preseason now, because the Lions have historically under Dan Campbell not played their starters like at all, basically in the preseason, especially lately. Dan said maybe that'll change going forward. And you are opening the injury risk a little bit by doing that. So I thought that was the value of joint practices, that you got your starters to play competitively against somebody else, but you're not going to the ground. You're playing thud. Like it's a little bit more controlled. You can manufacture artificially like certain situations, red zone and third down and all that. So I'm a little bit surprised by that, but I also hear, like you said, the argument where maybe at this point in their progression as a team, the value is not as high.
Well, and I think I don't know if I want to call this a problem, but I'm sure something that like limits the effectiveness of the exercise is every year it seems like the Lions are taking it way more seriously, or just like they have a different practice style than the team that's coming in. And so it's like, okay, this team is playing a different sport than you. They're playing 2-hand touch. The Lions are like trying to simulate tackle football in a lot of ways. And you saw that with the Bears last year. Like the Bears went to joint practices. They're playing tackle football. Every other team is playing 2-hand touch. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? What are the Bears doing? The Bears are crazy. And it's just like, well, that probably wasn't an effective partnership for joint practices from a Bears standpoint. Cause it's like you show up and you're like, oh wow, you are way less aggressive than my teammate, which it's supposed to be the opposite.
As an aside, that contributes nothing to this conversation. I remember during last year's training camp before Tim Patrick got traded, I don't even know if they were in pads yet. It might have been like the first day in pads, but we were standing on the sideline, whatever, with our little notebooks, writing notes down, and he's doing this, he's doing that, and Tim Patrick ran like an out route, and he caught it on the sideline, right in front of us, and Brian Branch came up like a heat-seeking missile and just kind of like blew him up, honestly.
Yeah.
And poor Tim Patrick, he got up and was like, like he was like, and then I just remember Brian Branch, and like you said, like there's a happy medium to it. Like some plays go harder than others, like the Lions practice real aggressively, whatever. But I just remember Branch hitting him, and he like ran past us, and he wasn't doing it for us. He was just doing it because that's who Brian Branch is. But he was so hyped up that he made the hit.
Oh,
I just remember
this.
hearing him. Yeah, he's like skipping back, and he's like, "Woo!" that was the thing I remember most from last year's training camp.
With all due respect, the Miami Dolphins are not bringing that energy.
Yes.
So yeah,
at least they weren't last
pretty
year.
much. Yeah, right. Penei Sewell seems likely to move to left tackle. It was interesting. Like we Dan Campbell was asked about it, and he was like, "If you're asking me, that's what I'd like to do, but what is your decision?" So, and basically, like, you know what, like we think we're going to do that. We're pretty sure we're going to do that. I don't want to fully commit to it yet. I think the only thing that is like potentially holding them up from making that decision like final as of right now is the potential that they draft a left tackle who is like wholly uncomfortable on the right side. But even then, I don't know. We'll see. But we talked about the Brad Holmes interview that Lions Collective did last week, and the attraction to Larry Borum was his tape at right tackle. And so I think that's kind of, they seem pretty committed to putting him over there. And
Yeah, I agree that it is basically like the only holdup is the draft. If they draft like a Caden,
do we draft Caleb Lomu?
Right, Caleb. Yeah, like a guy that played almost pretty much exclusively on the left side. I think it was exclusively on the left side for Proctor. That's the only hang up, I think. And if they draft a guy that's comfortable at right, then yeah, they'll shift Penei over. But if, like I've said this before, that if they don't need to, like if they do draft Lomu or Proctor or someone like that, as much as I am confident in Penei to be an all-pro at any position on the offense, that if they lined him up at receiver, he'd go for 900 yards and 8 touchdowns, that you've seen it for 5 years now that he's an all-pro at right tackle. If I'm 99% confident in him at left, but I'm 100% confident in him at right, if I don't have to move him, then I won't. But that's just, that's my perspective. And ultimately it doesn't matter because, like I said, it's probably not that big of a difference. Penei Sewell's probably going to be great no matter what position he's playing.
Yeah, and he played left tackle throughout college and then started his career with those 7 games of left tackle. So he's very familiar over there. Dan Campbell said it'd be like riding a bike. He said all he ever asks from Campbell is like, give me a day or 2 heads up so I can just like get the muscle memory down real quick. So thought that was fun too. Interesting note on the German game. So we don't know still who the Lions are playing or when the game will be specifically. Hopefully we get that in the very near future. But we will obviously keep you guys updated on that. But we asked Dan Campbell, like, what is the plan for traveling to Germany? Because that's always a big storyline with teams going overseas and, dealing with the jet lag of that travel. And it's like, you're trying to balance, like in our minds, you're like, oh, well, of course they would go over there early because you have St. Brown, who's this excellent marketing tool. And like, they can gain so much from that, from a brand standpoint of like bringing the team over early and going through all these different promotional events and yada, yada. But they're trying to win a football game. So I think that's obviously going to be first and foremost at the top of their mind. They don't know how they're going to do it just yet. They could go out Monday. They could go out Thursday or Friday. We'll just have to wait and see. But Dan Campbell had a pretty funny quote. He said, yeah, I'm still wrestling with that, honestly. I go back and forth. I've been trying to pitch, and this is now me bumping in, quote ends. He said this, and I go, this is going to be something really funny. And he goes, I'm trying to pitch the idea. Let's just buy out a cruise ship right after that last game. Jump on the cruise ship, and we'll just adapt as we go over, man. We go up, we walk through on the deck. We've got the hot tubs, pools, recovery rooms. We can game plan on the way. When he said that, he was like using a PlayStation controller. And then he continues, I don't feel like anybody is taking it, though. I had a coach inform me it's so many nautical miles. It's going to take 8 days to get there. I'm like, just keep your mouth shut. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm bouncing it around. He went on to say, I've done both, travel early versus travel late. Played well with both, lost with both, basically. We went out there a week, one time. One time we went out there a week, got throttled. Then we went out on Thursday, played well. I know this. You're going to do whatever you think you can do. And whatever you're not willing to give into, the team that's got the most energy, the most juice, doesn't use excuses, is probably going to have a chance to win this game.
You probably could have given me a million guesses to pick a phrase that Dan Campbell would have said in his owners' meetings press conference, and nautical miles was not one that I would have guessed.
No. But it's a good observation, though. I mean, I don't know how many regular miles it is. What's a nautical? Is that 7 times? I wish I wouldn't have explored this because I have no idea, and I'm going to sound really stupid. I think it's 20 miles.
That's a great question. I don't know. Yeah, I have no.
Nah.
What?
It's 1.15 miles.
Nice.
Oh man.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, I
didn't go to science school, folks.
I went to football school.
Yeah,
I went to football school at Oakland University without the football.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see what Dan does because I feel like he has like all the lived experiences he needs to make his own decision, but the lived experiences paint two different pictures. So it's like, well, what do you do? I don't know. Maybe I'm sure he will loop in and talk to like the player leadership and whatever the council of players of who speaks for the team and gather their thoughts as well before they decide.
Another interesting note about the Germany game that we got from Rod Wood. Not a guaranteed bye. Obviously, like that's kind of been a trend as the NFL has more international games every year, and the schedule just becomes too difficult to give everybody a bye week after an international game, which I think is something that should be remedied by having less international games rather than having less bye weeks after international games. But I would even say it's like seems unlikely at this point that they're going to have a bye week.
He said he's not expecting it. He said he's not expecting it.
Yeah, and so we'll keep an eye on that. But the one thing he said he did request with the schedule was to not have back-to-back Thursday games after Thanksgiving. Last 2 years, the Lions have played Thursday. And with the Germany game seeming like it's going to be sometime in early to mid-November, that would create quite a schedule crunch at like a really, really, really important time of year where they'd be like playing in Germany, coming back short, or, coming back from Germany, playing a game on Sunday, short week into Thanksgiving, and then back-to-back on Thursday. So they're trying to avoid that back-to-back Thursday game. He said it was the only request that he made on the schedule this year. Mm-hmm. And from a scheduling perspective, it sounds like the Lions are still going to be a hot ticket this year. He said the VP of broadcast planning, I think, Mike North. Let me quickly check his title real quick. But he said that like he was pushing back on all of his requests. So
yeah, he said that basically for like everything that Rod Wood requested on behalf of the Lions, the NFL was like, well, Lions are a big ticket, buddy. So
yeah, and like that game on Amazon Prime last year was it was the highest rated Thursday night football game in Amazon Prime's history, and they've been doing this for 4 years. So part of that obviously has to do with the Dallas Cowboys being involved in it. The Cowboys are probably the biggest draw in America still, but I mean, not for the last few years though. I think the Lions have actually like kind of capped interest in terms of like when you flip the game on. The Lions seem to be outrating everybody, at least up until last season. So be on the lookout for that as well as it pertains to the schedule. As it pertains to the center situation in Detroit, I thought it was interesting. Dan Campbell talking a little bit about Cade Mays and just what the getting him early on in free agency allowed them to do. Because I really think that like, I don't want to say it set the tone because we didn't really see many more signings like him. We didn't see any other signings like him, any other multi-year signings, every other like real investments. But I think it was kind of important to get that settled right away. So then you're not like freaking out while you're trying to also fill all these other holes and get depth and stuff like that. So asked him about getting Cade Mays early in free agency. He said, yeah, it was big. He and Linderbaum, we thought were the two. So we were fired up to be able to get him. That was big for us, man, being able to get that centerpiece. We feel like Mays can anchor. He can keep the pocket clean for Goff up the middle, and we don't feel restricted in the run game. We do feel like he can do the pin and pulls, the wide zones, the gaps with him. We think he's got enough versatility and all that, and he's an ascending player. Like, he really hasn't played it that long. He's getting better. We felt a lot of growth last year on that tape, and they played good, really good opponents. A lot of them that we played, we get in the playoffs, and we just thought he had a really steady, solid season that's ascending, and we're like, man, this guy upgrades us, which is pretty much everything that we've been saying about him throughout this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about maybe it didn't, you said it set the tone for free agency. They ended up just signing a bunch of one-year deals beyond that. But I think of it like, if they had not gotten him, I really don't know where they would have went at center. Like, let's say Cade Mays just really wanted to go back to Carolina and went back to Carolina, like with Biotish going to the Chargers before free agency even opened, and McGovern not making it to the market, Linderbaum making $27 a year or whatever it was from the Raiders, so that I would assume disqualified the Lions. I really don't know like where they would have gone. So the fact that they got him on what I believe is like a reasonable deal, like he's the 9th highest paid center in the league. Like we said at the time, and I still think it now, I think it was a very as home run as you could get for a player of his quality. That is maybe not like he's not all pro, but he is still ascending.
Mm-hmm. Thought it was interesting, some of the stuff that he said kind of just about the defensive scheme. And that's something that we've kind of been touching on throughout these last couple of years, is like, it doesn't seem in a lot of ways like the defensive scheme is working, particularly with the man-to-man coverage stuff, simply because the like time to pressure and time to the quarterback has been so slow. What do you know what it was last year off the top of your head? I think it was like, if it wasn't last, it was pretty dang close, second to last or something.
I believe it was last.
And so like that doesn't really work when you're playing man coverage. And so like I thought last year Shep was more adaptable than we've ever seen from Aaron Glenn. So like I did like that part of things, but we all still wondered kind of what changes are coming for this defensive scheme, because at a lot of points in the second half of last season, they were just outmatched. And it just seemed like they couldn't impose their will on an offense in really any way outside of that Philly game.
Yeah, and the Philly game, the defense was aided by some weather, just as the Lions' offense was not aided by the weather. It was super windy and rainy that day. But yeah, we talked about it on, I think, our last week's episode, where they lived in base, and they were able to live in base in large part because Alex Anzalone covers so well for a linebacker. And now that they lost him, I don't know who the heck is supposed to do his job. So it was a little refreshing to hear Dan Campbell say, you know, they have options to be multiple. They could play nickel, they could play 4 down, they could play 5 down, and things like that. We'll have to see it in practice how it looks. But I do think we are, unless they make a move in the draft that is like a direct Anzalone replacement, I do think we are on the way to seeing more nickel from this team in 26.
Yeah. We talked to Rod Wood about injury prevention, because that was one of the things that we discussed with him was this last season and how do you guys bounce back after this last season? And he was one of the other questions that we asked, because last year I asked him, hey, you know, you just went through an unprecedented run with injuries. Like, what kind of investigation have you done to the cause of those? And he basically said, you know, we looked into everything. Is it the turf? Is it the way we practice? But really, I think it just breaks down to us playing a violent style of defense. And followed up with him again this year, just being like, hey, happened 2 years in a row. You guys lost a bunch of players in the secondary. Is there anything that you found in additional research? And the answer was basically not really. Like, it still continues to be, you know, the way we play. You know, there were some freak accidents, I guess you could say. I don't know. The Brian Branch, like Achilles and like those things, I think is not a result of the way they play. And part of me wonders if they're not giving enough attention to the way that they practice, because I feel like every team in the NFL thinks they're crazy, or at least a lot of them do.
Fred Warner said it on Saints podcast.
Yeah. Avante Maddox, when he came here, he's like, you guys do this every day? And they're like, yeah. And so I don't know. This is my speculation. I'm still wondering, you know, are they overworked, and does that lead to some of the more, you know, soft tissue, DJ Reed with the hamstring injury, things like that. So, but according to Rod Wood, they still believe that it's just comes down to their violent style of defense.
Right. Yeah, and I think we all agree that some of the injuries, like Hutch is obviously in 24 total freak accident. Like there was no preventing that. His leg whipped into Aleem's, like it is what it is. Or Carlton breaking his jaw because somebody landed on his helmet. Like it's just unfortunately is what it is. Like that's just gonna be what happens. Circling back, time to pressure. The Lions were third to last year.
Third to last, gotcha. And then Dan Campbell on Taron Arnold, whose name has surfaced in connection with an alleged armed robbery and kidnapping situation that has been going on in Tampa, Florida. Asked about him, saying we've probably everything you guys know. We've got all the information that says he wasn't involved. That's what we know. That's all we know. And I mean, that's all I can really say. We're monitoring what's out there. I mean, as of a month ago, this was nothing, so I have no idea what this is. As far as I know, it's still not a big deal. It seems like he wasn't involved with this. He was asked a follow-up question, just talking about like, how do you make sure that you have enough cornerback insurance with that going on? He said, getting Rock back was big for us. Now, that's not why. Well, if that happens, that wasn't the thought. But if that happens, the way you talk about insurance, I mean, we'll need to be able to fill in somewhere with depth. But look, we got Rakestraw. Rake's coming back. I know it's unproven right now, but he's had a good offseason to this point. We got Roger McCreary, and so we've got some things here. We'll just take it as it comes until something happens. I feel like we're going to be good here. I'm going to trust what the kid said. So that is the update from Dan Campbell's perspective on things.
He also said, just on the cornerback position at large, he also added that he does see Ennis still more as an outside guy moving forward, which is interesting because they said that last year heading into training camp. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't here for his rookie training camp before he got hurt, but he was playing a lot of nickel, almost all nickel, correct? As a rookie?
I don't think so. I think he was playing a little bit outside too, like a lot of second team stuff.
And then yes,
maybe like his like actual role, like what his role would have been if he played on game day. Yes, he was in line to start at nickel in week 2 before he got hurt in warmups. But in training camp, they just threw him out there on the outside, and he was excellent.
And then going into his second year in training camp, Dan was like, kind of done with the nickel stuff, just going to be outside. And we were all like, that's interesting. And then he got hurt before we could really see anything about it. But it does sound like they do see him as an outside guy, which is telling is the wrong word, which is it's good to know because in my brain, slot was either going to be Ennis, McCreary, or Isian. And assuming Ennis stays on the outside, that kind of knocks one out of the race. So maybe Isian's more of a safety, and then maybe McCreary is like, he does have the heavy inside track to be the starter there at nickel.
Yeah. Last thing I got from our sessions with Dan Campbell and Rod Wood was both of them kind of emphasize the idea of taking this last place finish and turning it into a positive, and like trying to recreate the desperation and maybe the grit and all of those things. Dan Campbell, when talking about it, like he referenced the 2022 team of like that team was not that talented, but they had a lot of grit to them. And so they're trying to find a way to, I guess, reinstill that in the team. He said, we all want talent, but it's always nice to have a little bit of saltiness to you over the talent that lacks saltiness, because that's kind of what we were in 22. That's a little bit of it. And in part of 23, we had talent, but we had some salty guys, and we were highly competitive, and we were willing to make it work, figure it out. And so just a little bit of that edge back, and some of it comes with youth. Now with youth, you're going to have some of the stuff that gets frustrating, the mentals, but we believe that we can get there as a staff and with the rest of the players that we have now. And that was kind of something that he said when in response to a question, because when we've been talking to a lot of these guys throughout free agency, a lot of them have been guys who, they had their role diminished in the last year, or they're coming off a down year, but were a relatively high floor player in the past, like a DJ Wanham, or they're all coming to Detroit fresh off some sort of like personal or professional adversity. And that kind of shone through in our interviews with them of just, Greg Dortch talking about like, I am grit. Like I am a Lion. Like I've always been a Lion in a lot of ways. And so I think that was kind of a big focal point. And what was interesting, Rod Wood kind of even discussed it. He's like, how do we recreate that hunger that, Amon-Ra St. Brown comes in here with, and he's pissed off at the world because he had, X amount of receivers taken ahead of him. And, that ends up like inspiring greatness. And not that St. Brown has fallen off at all, but how do you make sure that these next wave of players coming in who were never around or really asked questions about like the bad times of the Lions, because I think that was a big motivator for this team for a long time, at least early in the stages, was the fact that like nobody believed in them. Like even when they would go on their runs at the end of 22 and throughout 2023, even they win 12 games in 2023, win the division. And I still think there was a lot of talk about like, it's the Lions, they're not going to do anything. They're the, blah, 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 blah. And then they shed all that and they kind of just like reset to zero. Like I would even say like they have a little bit of a bravado about them. I think that they expect to win games and expect all these things. And I think that that's important. Like Tom Brady, one of his superpowers was just like having the utmost confidence that at the end of the day, he was going to find a way to win. And I think that that's extremely powerful, but you need to find a way to do that without sacrificing maybe the hunger and some of the things that you were doing on your way up the mountain that got you there in the first place. So it is a delicate balancing act, and I'm interested to see how they kind of try to get that done, because it sounds like it's a point of like real, like they're really trying to
concerted effort,
putting a lot of yes. Thank you
I think
for saving me. I was drowning. I think of the word.
I think back to last year where Dan Campbell and the Lions, I think they were in their however many week stretch of win-loss. That was the name of the 25 season. Where Dan Campbell said that he wants to make sure that the young players don't get accustomed to that and like kind of ho-hum about it, where it's like, oh, well, another week we couldn't string 2 wins together. Like, you know what I mean? And he said like, the older guys I don't got to worry about that, because like they lived in the bad times with us. Like I think Jared Goff, when he was mic'd up against the Titans in 24, where they were just demolishing the Titans, and I think he's on the sideline with St. Brown, and he says something to the effect of, he was like, that sucks for them, bro, but I'm happy we're on this side, like, because we've been there, like, and I'm happy to be on this side now, and like I'm not stopping, like, because I was over there at one point in my career. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how they sort of try to recapture that a little bit.
There was also a little bit of news happening offsite, not at owners' meetings, involving the Lions. What do you got for us?
Jake Bates officially back from the last time since we talked last podcast. That was a given. I wouldn't even call it total like big news, but it's official that he's back on the roster.
It was a formality.
Deal. Yeah, he was an exclusive rights free agent, which is like whatever. Like you have to have like less than 3 service years in the NFL as a free agent. He checked the boxes to be an exclusive rights free agent, and basically that means if the Lions offer him an exclusive rights tender, which is a 1-year deal at the league's minimum salary at the beginning of the offseason, he can't negotiate with anybody. So he either has 2 options: sign, or 3, I guess. Sign that, come to a different agreement with the Lions, or sit out for the season. Jake Bates wasn't going to sit out for the season, and he'd signed the 1-year minimum contract. So he's back for 1 more year, which I think is it lines up really well for the Lions, because he was awesome in year 1. I think he was fine in year 2. He definitely took a step back, but he was still, for his career, he's I think 43 of 46 from inside 50. So it's kind of funny, like, you know, when he joined, it's like he's got this massive leg, you know, the close, maybe he'll miss a chip shot or 2 here and there, but he could hit one from 80. And it's kind of a little bit been the opposite, where last year he was 4 for 9 from 50 plus, but it was like super consistent from inside 50. And one of those 3 misses was blocked. I think that was the Vikings game that it got blocked. Granted, the Dave Phipps said that was on him. Like, that wasn't the blocking assignments failing. He kicked the ball too low. But one of them got blocked. Anyway, I just think it lines up well for the Lions, where they get another 17-game sample size to see what he is, if they want to commit to him as their kicker of the future.
I do want to interject here and add one more thing from owners' meetings, because it was just a funny quote. But somebody came over to Dan Campbell's availability on Monday, and they were asking about like Jeremiah Love. I don't know what team they covered, but you know, just the idea of like the NFL seems to be returning to valuing running backs, and you know, it sounds like Jeremiah Love could go very high in this upcoming draft, but we don't know whether that will be the case until draft day happens. Like, I know in all of our mock drafts, like we've had him going at, I think 18 or 19, 20, something in that range to the Vikings. And so somebody, asked him, any regret about taking a running back that high? And he goes, no, we'd have taken him earlier. We would have taken him earlier.
Yeah. No,
all right. Tell me about this safety that the Lions signed, though.
Chuck Clark, who a veteran safety with 80 career starts in his time with the Ravens, former 6th round pick to the Ravens in 2017. was with them through the 22 season, went to the Jets in 23 and 24. He did miss the 23 season with a torn ACL, but was in New York for those couple of years, and then was with Pittsburgh last year, made 5 starts with Pittsburgh last year. Plus, he started in their playoff loss to the Texans, I believe it was, and he had a team high defensive grade from PFF of 89.1. I think it's just safety depth, right, at a position where, or depth at a position where there is some lingering injury concerns with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch.
And then last thing that we got for you here before we get to Keep 4, Cut 4, we are starting a new series at DetroitNews.com. 23 and 23 is, I think, the name that we're going with here. But basically, we're looking at 23 first-round prospects who could be at play for the Lions in the 23 days leading up to the draft. So we started the series today, April 1st, with our first player, Akeem Mesidor from Miami, the edge rusher. And Rich got that done. Rich is going to get that going through the end of the week while I finish up with some owners meeting stuff. Rich, what can you tell us about Akeem Mesidor?
Yeah, I really like the format that we set it up in, if not selfishly, because I obviously I knew who Akeem Mesidor was going into this. I knew the type of player that he was, and I knew where he's been projected, the counting stats that he had at Miami last year. But the way that I wrote the story kind of forced me to dive a little bit deeper into him, beyond the numbers. And I don't know, I really liked it. I guess to pull one thing that I wrote is that what I thought about was, because he has the playing style that the Lions like opposite Hutchinson, staunch against the run, can set an edge, can rush with power, but he doesn't have the size. He's smaller. And I just think back to, for reference, he's 6'3", 259 with 32 and 1/8 inch arms. Think about all the early down guys the Lions have had opposite Hutchinson in the past couple of years. Kaminsky was 6'5", 288 with arms that were more than 2 inches longer than that. Davenport was 6'6", 285 with arms that were more than 2 inches longer than that. Peyton Turner, who they just signed, 6'6", 270 with 35-inch arms. So Mesidor is a lot smaller, but I recalled back to Brad Holmes wearing the HWS height, weight, speed sweatshirt with the line through it. It's talking about how they don't go off of what it says on the piece of paper. If the player plays how they like, then they like him. They don't care if he weighs 200 pounds or 400 pounds. So I don't know. That's kind of how I see Mesidor, is that he doesn't check the physical boxes on paper, but kind of does with his play. And I explained that a little bit more in the story, and I do encourage and ask politely that people read it.
Yeah, and we'll have that going all throughout April. So if you're interested in getting to know some of the first round prospects who could be in play, I don't mean to toot our own horns, but I don't think there's a better way to kind of get a big picture view on each player. And by the end of it, the goal is for you to have like your favorite 5 players. So you can go into draft night like hoping that the Lions draft, because you know these guys so well. So make sure you stay tuned into that. Subscribe to the DetroitNews.com. It's never been a better time to be a Detroit News subscriber. Interestingly enough, the one thing about Akeem Mesidor that I think is a problem for me personally, and I think a problem for a lot of people, is his age. He'll be 25 by draft day, and I hesitate to spend first round capital on a player who we're not really sure if the increase in production was a matter of him being a man against boys in college, or if he really took a developmental leap at the age of 24 years old, rushing opposite of the best edge rusher in the draft class in Ruben Bain, or one of the best edge rushers in the draft class in Ruben Bain. So those things coming into play, I think, are a little bit interesting. But on the age thing in particular, I asked Rod Wood, because he's retiring soon, and one of the things I asked him was what are the things on the horizon that you're taking note of in terms of the NFL landscape? He said one of the other things that we've talked about a little bit this morning was the whole changing landscape of college football and what that may do to people that are coming into the NFL that are older. We talked about Indiana having a team that was almost as old as the Packers in terms of age. So when you're drafting a 24-year-old or 25-year-old, their second contract, they're 30. What's that going to do now or what's that going to do to how you plan for the second contract and how much you want to invest in a 25-year-old? So those are all things that I think are out there, but I'd say for the most part, those are all positive changes to handle. So it's something that teams are thinking about, and it's something that, he seems like a big outlier right now because he kind of is, but as time goes by and like guys are being incentivized to go back to school, like you can make so much more money as a star player at a Power 4 school than you can being a 6th-round pick. Like there's no financial incentive taking them to the NFL like there used to be. And this might be the start of a trend. But, somebody followed up about that, and he was like, it kind of like college basketball went through a similar thing where about 10 years ago, for forever, it was like guys stayed 4 years and then they went into the draft. And then, turn of the century, guys are coming out of high school, and then they stop that. You have to go play college. And then the one and done era kind of ushers in. But now you look at the teams that are competing and winning, and it's teams that are built with guys who have been around in college basketball for 4 or 5 years. And so I think that's interesting, just kind of, looking at how that's changed, and I guess just appreciating the fact that, it seems like this trend is going this way, but we'll see where it goes, because none of these things are ever set in stone as it relates to like trends and stuff like that.
Right. And maybe we'll see less of the extreme outliers because the COVID waiver is going to run out here shortly of players that played in 2020 and didn't count against their
I think this should be like the last year.
I think so.
But Brad Holmes has even talked to, Brad Holmes has talked about, I think like the last 3 years, like maybe the last 2 years of like, the draft is not that deep. It's not as deep as it used to be. And I'm sure part of it is guys who would be intriguing prospects are like, screw it, I'll go back and play for $2 million at Ole Miss, or whatever it may be. They're finding ways, a better way to get their money, and they can, continue to be in college, continue to keep it, they're borderline professional athletes at that point. But it's just a really interesting, changing dynamic. And I think it's interesting that teams are recognizing like, okay, this is the way that things are going now.
Right, because even if the extreme outliers like a 25-year-old Mesidor aren't going to be 25, I think the average age of a prospect is probably still going to increase, because instead of coming out as a 3-year player that's 20 years old, maybe you wait 2 more years and you redshirt your freshman year and you stay for 4 after that, and then you're 22 versus 20. So the average age does go up. Even if it's not 25, it's still 22 or 23. But what do you got for me for this Connect 4?
All right, keep 4, cut 4. George Gervin, the Iceman, is in the news this week. Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears trying to trademark the name that was originally owned by somebody else. And so for today's keep 4, cut 4, we're doing NFL nicknames. Are you ready?
I am ready. George Gervin from Detroit.
George Gervin from Detroit, legend, Hall of Famer. I can't remember which high school he went to.
King.
King, Detroit King. That's right. We're going to start off with Marshawn Lynch, nickname Beast Mode.
Beast Mode. Are these all football nicknames?
These are all football nicknames.
Okay. I'm going to keep Beast Mode. I think Beast Mode's pretty sick, and it really did. And along with Beast Mode, I'm looping in Beastquake, because have a nickname for a play based on your nickname is pretty sick.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Up next, we have William the Refrigerator Perry.
Man, that's also a good one. I'm gonna like every single one. I don't want to just keep the first 4, but I am gonna keep the fridge, because how could you not?
Up next, this is I think I got you in a bind here. Calvin Megatron Johnson.
Oh no. Oh man, I can't cut Megatron. That'd be disrespectful on the Lions podcast. So I'm starting off with 3 keeps in a row. All
right. Up next, we have another Lions legend, Dick Night Train Lane.
Man.
So NFL.com. Here, real quick, actually, hold on. Go ahead and think of what you're gonna do.
Man, it's tough with Night Train Lane, because I'd argue. I don't want to pit Megatron versus Night Train up against each other, but I'd argue Night Train might be a little bit of a cooler nickname. I don't know. And I really do want to keep him. What do you have something to add before I make a decision here?
So according to NFL.com, there was a misconception that Dick Lane got the Night Train nickname because of a popular song at the time, but the truth is he received it because he took the night train due to his fear of flying.
Interesting.
So I thought it was because he played like a night train, like
hit
he got you on the tracks. Yeah.
Just for the sake of the game, I have to cut him to keep a spot open. But
this is tough.
At this point, I probably would have kept him over Megatron. Obviously, Calvin is Calvin, but I think maybe just because Megatron. I don't know. I'm cutting Night Train.
NFL.com has him ranked as the number 2 nickname in NFL history.
Tough.
So tough look. But also you're in the torture chamber because all of these are going to be great. Up next, we have the Bus, Jerome Bettis.
The Bus. I feel like the Bus and the Fridge are the same vibe, and so that's the same player. You know what I mean? I don't need 2 right guards.
Perry was like a defensive lineman.
Well, no, I'm just saying that like I don't need the Bus and the Fridge are the same archetype of nickname. I don't need 2. Listen, I don't need 2 Kenny Gallaudays. One's enough. So I'm gonna, since I already have the Fridge, I'm gonna cut the Bus.
I'm dying to know why Kenny Gallauday was top of mind.
He was the first X receiver that didn't create separation, but man, did he win jump balls.
Yeah. Up next, we have Broadway Joe Namath.
Broadway Joe. That's like the coolest nickname. I don't know if it's the best, but I think it has.
I agree.
I'm gonna keep
the most aura. It has the most aura. Like
yes.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep Broadway. So that means I have to cut the last. What is there 2 left?
Yeah. You're gonna be cutting Primetime Deion
Sanders.
No,
that's the coolest one.
And Sweetness Walter Payton.
Oh, jeez.
I don't think there was any right answers.
There was not a right answer, but there might have been a wrong answer. Man. So I think
typically when we do this, like it's like I feel like me personally, I try to like balance with like 4 good ones, 4 bad ones. Like I'm trying to lead you. I'm trying to get you. In a certain way. I'm trying to make you put the cuts and the keeps and the keeps and the cuts. But in this one, I think they were all worthy of keeps, and so I think this was kind of an impossible task for you. Not to let you off the hook because I don't want to do that, but
I think I would have kept Primetime. I would have kept the Fridge. I would have kept Broadway, and the last one. Probably Night Train.
Yeah.
So whatever. I cut 3 of those that I would have kept. So you got me.
Yeah. So I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Man, that feels good. All right. Thanks to everybody for listening to today's episode of the Gridiron Gang podcast. Go check us out, DetroitNews.com. We'll have content coming from owners meetings all throughout the rest of the week. We'll have content coming on the draft. It's draft month, April 1st. Super excited to kind of keep rolling all that stuff out as well. And we will talk to you guys on this podcast next week. Same time, same place. Thanks for listening.